computer server at Princeton University, real time. It's happening right now. And they are giving at 200 bits per second. I can talk technical to this audience because I know this is a technical audience we're working with. These little devices are reporting back at 200 bits per second, real time, and they're showing the changes in mass consciousness in response to everything from the good things that happen, like the Super Bowl and American television programs, the last episode of The Bachelor. The whole world was fascinated by that phenomenon and tuned in to see what was happening, and it showed up on the server, as well as disastrous things like certainly 9/11 and the death of Princess Diana. And you can go on to click one of the buttons. You can look real time and see the bar charts real time of how consciousness is changing and how it's affecting these devices. If you've got a pretty fast computer, you can see that.
Well, since these studies then confirm the effectiveness of conscious energy, I think my $64,000 question is, why was this lost? And more specifically, lost implies that, somehow it just fell off the wagon along the road. But could it be that this was taken from us by people who desire control and power?
It's a good question, Jim, and there are actually two time periods in history we're talking about. What we know today is that the way we see our modern world is linked to our ancient past through a lineage of wisdom, and that lineage has been broken at least twice in recorded human history. First time was with the burning of the Great Library in Alexandria, Egypt, where we know Roman historians have documented that over 532,000 scrolls, many of them already ancient, in the 4th century before Christ. Those scrolls were lost in that library, so we lost a lot of information then. The second time was with the biblical edits of the early church in the 4th century, in the year 325 A.D., where we know the Emperor Constantine and his council, in an attempt to create what we today call the Western Christian Bible, they completely removed 20 books and edited, 25 books, completely removed and edited and rearranged another 20 books, condensing them into what we now call the King James Version of the Western Bible. And as good as the Bible is today, it's a good historical document, but the best biblical scholars will freely admit that the Bible is incomplete.
That's
and
true.
We know that because
what I find interesting is, though, they won't use the word edit, they use the word redacted. Use people.
Or they use the word canonized. They'll say these texts were not canonized. And the truth is they were never really lost. They were put into the vaults in the Vatican Library. And for 1,700 years, even though they were not canonized, any time during the 1,700 years, the Church could have said, we found these documents. They were not part of the canonized Bible, but we thought you might be interested in reading them, and here they are, for your reading pleasure. And obviously that didn't happen. It was with the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls,
right.
The oldest version.
Library.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, the Dead Sea Scrolls were the oldest versions of the Old Testament. The Nag Hammadi Library were the oldest versions of the New Testament. And both libraries had been hidden before the edits of the church. So when the libraries were found, there were books that those young archaeologists found back in 1947, 1948. They found books of the Bible that hadn't been seen for 1,700 years. It was a different world back then. They said, what should we do? What should we do with the lost Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Mary and the first book of Adam and Eve and the second book of Adam and Eve? And at that time, the answer was just, don't tell anybody for a while, and that's kind of what happened.
Exactly. That's what gets me, is that here's an opportunity to go right back to the original sources and add to our knowledge of both the Old Testament and the New Testament, and instead, I think you'll agree with me that in both those instances, the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi Library, instead of throwing it all out to the public and saying, here's what's said, basically it's been kept under wraps and just slowly bits and pieces of it leaked out to the public?
Well, it was a different world in the 1940s, and for the scrolls, certainly they were kept under wraps. The non-commodity library was released a little faster, but the irony, Jim, to me, is the very books that tell us of the power of human emotion and our ability to interact with this intelligent field, this quantum essence that permeates all of creation. Those instructions were in the books that were edited from our culture, and that's why this sounds so strange to us on the one hand. On the other hand, it's like the great secret that everybody knows. On the other hand, you leave the Western culture, everybody else already knows this. It's a given.
But see, that would empower the people. And by eliminating the reference to the power of the conscious energy, then they, this is where they did not want anyone to realize that you don't necessarily have to have a priest or a bishop or anything else to access the universal consciousness.
Well, I think this is where it's all coming full circle, Jim, is because in the absence of those texts, we lost our understandings of who we are in creation and how we relate to one another and the world around us, kind of wandering aimlessly without a user's manual, if you will. And we developed science to tell us these things. So here science now is telling us in a scientific language now what these texts were already saying to us 1,700 years ago, a very different language, so that the science is saying, hey, there's a field out there. We're connected to it. You communicate it with the field through feeling and emotion. How do we use it in our lives? And this is the beauty, I think, of where we are at this time in history, is because now, to make sense of the science, we've got to go back into the ancient wisdom, and now it's coming full circle, bringing the wisdom forward and marrying it with the science so that we can make use of what we've discovered. And the conditions of the world, Jim, are driving this. The potential for global war is at the highest point now than it has. Over one-half of the nations of the earth are engaged in armed conflict. Right now, the United States has boots on the ground in at least 22 different countries. And we are living a time of the greatest nuclear proliferation and the greatest threat since the Cold War. If we're ever going to figure out that we are part of all that we see and that we can participate in this peace process, I think now is the time where we're going to have to bring that to bear upon the conditions of the world.
Absolutely.
And it's done through human feeling, human emotion based in our hearts. As we said with William Henry in another interview, this war that many people believe is being fought in our minds will never be won in our minds. It's a war that will be won in our hearts, literally, because peace is a condition that must be felt in our hearts to be mirrored into the world around us.
Now you're speaking of the war on terrorism, right?
Well, the war on terrorism and all of the offshoots of the fear-based war and control that comes with that. It goes much deeper than simply terrorism. That's a whole program unto itself.
Exactly, but it's all for, as they said during Vietnam, it's for the hearts and minds of the people.
It is. So I think it's interesting that the conditions of our world are driving us to marry the science and spirituality to find a solution, because obviously the solutions that we're trying to apply now are solutions that aren't going to work.
That's true, and you keep talking. We've talked about this energy field, and what I think is pretty amazing is that you go back to Einstein's unified field theory and to the cutting edge quantum physics, and we find that the entire universe is basically nothing but energy and an energy field of which we are a part. And I know this is a great help to me in trying to understand the psychic ability that the U.S. military used and called remote viewing. And prior to that, they call it clairvoyance. And this is, of course, the ability for someone to use the subtle psychic means to perceive people, places, things at a distance. And they know it works, and they could test it in the laboratory. And the reason it hasn't gotten more widespread acknowledgement is because it violates the scientific method in that they don't quite know how it works or why. But what I came up with is that